So Millennial and Generation Z-led progressive organizations released an open letter to Vice President Joe Biden earlier this month, expressing their concern over his inability to earn the trust of a vast majority of Americans 45 and under. In the next few weeks, we'll be speaking to the leaders of these organizations to talk about the strategy and stakes that this open letter presents for their groups. Today, we're speaking with our first guest on this topic, Sarah Audelo. Sarah is the executive director of the Alliance for Youth Action, the nation's largest youth grassroots organizing network in the country. Sarah, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Can you talk about first why the youth and young people, and I'm very thrilled to still be considered a young people. I'm like, oh, 45, that's great. I'm under the curve. Why there's a lack of trust in Joe Biden at this point?
You know, I think there's a few things that are going on right now as we have this election looming in the middle of the pandemic, which is, you know, we always knew that 2020 was going to be really hard. I don't think we could have ever anticipated it would be this hard. Mm-hmm. And so when we are talking about trying to engage young people, young voters and millennials and Generation Z, we're talking about 37% of the electorate. This is not just like some small kids table that is shoved to the side that no one really cares about until the end. This is a major demographic and set a couple of generations that are going to be key to any victory in November. And so when we see that that Vice President Biden had such low and so few votes during the primary, enthusiasm numbers are not high right now. It's something that's very concerning for those of us who are very committed to making sure that Donald Trump is a one-term president.
Can you talk a little bit about, before we get to the letter, can we talk about the work of the Alliance for Youth Action and what populations you serve and what you're advocating for?
Yeah, so the Alliance is a network of youth-led organizations who are doing electoral and issue organizing in about 20 states across the country. And so they're very focused on city council and state houses as they're fighting for change. Our groups have registered and turned out hundreds of thousands of young voters in elections up and down the ballot. And then when we're not trying to turn out folks during electoral cycles, including on off years, including in special elections, as those are, as we know, are very important as well, our folks are winning on the issues that young people care most about. And so our folks in Colorado have led really incredible work on student debt. Our crew in Chicago Votes, has been at the forefront of democracy reform, fighting to make sure that those in pretrial detention in Cook County jails are able to vote. There are now polling places in Cook County jails because of their amazing work. So these are just incredible young organizers across the country who are really trying to fight for a more progressive and just future for all of us.
Talk about the message of the open letter to Joe Biden, and what do you hope he takes away from it?
I hope that Vice President Biden sees that one, young people are issues first voters. It's when you ask young people, what is the number one reason why you're voting? They say it's to make an impact on the communities that they care about most. It's to make sure that their experiences and their community's experiences are being addressed and heard.
Sarah, is that in conflict with people over 45 that you find?
I mean, for older voters, frequently we'll see that people are really more excited about political parties and party identity, and that's just not the case with young people. Mm-hmm. Young people are pretty nonpartisan, and so they're not into the Republican Party by and large. They're also not into the Democratic Party, and so you have a lot of young voters who are identifying as independents, and they want to be engaged on the issues, and not because there's a letter next to a candidate's name.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, because you can't make an assumption that letter stands for the things that we once thought they stood for.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off from your answer to the previous question, but which was, you know, in your letter, what do you hope that Biden takes away from it?
I mean, I hope he sees that there are very clear issues that young people care about most, and there's a lot of movement that we'd like him to see to the left on the issues that young people care about most. It's also about the messaging and how he's talking about his campaign overall. Return to normalcy is not a frame that young people are excited about because we've what does that mean?
Right.
What is normal?
He needs to remember that young people were not even born when 9/11 happened, and you know they don't have a normal. Yeah.
I mean, part of us millennials as our normal was coming into adulthood during a recession, and now we're in round two. Like, what does that even mean for what normal is for us? And certainly not something we're striving to return to. They really want to look to the future, and we want to see his vision for the future and how we're going to be part of building that together. And then, of course, the personnel component is really important here because we know that people also equals policy. And so while Vice President Biden hasn't necessarily been with us on all the issues, it's really important for him to surround himself with people who have been with us on a lot of these issues.
And what are the issues most important that you hope Biden will pay attention to?
Well, time and again, the economy is a major issue that young people care about. Again, from our generations growing up and coming of age during recessions, to what is it meant to be underemployed. A lot of times, people will glamorize like the gig economy as if folks were excited to have flexibility but no benefits, and unstable hours and unstable pay. Folks that we're raising our kids without access to paid family leave is incredibly important. So the economy is really vital for young voters. And we're seeing this especially now when young people are disproportionately impacted by the recession that we are in. We also, though, it's other issues like climate that young people have taken to the streets time and again to demand a more just future for our planet. But it's also about the impacts of race and racism on our communities as young people and our kids in our schools are being reported, are being more bullied and harassed for just being who they are, especially in these times. So there's many, many issues. Young voters are not single issue voters. They're multi-issue voters. And that's why we felt it was important for all of us across many issues to come together and to basically back each other up and say, this is what our voters care about.
Can you talk about your strategy? Are you hoping that Biden reads the letter and makes concessions? Are you hoping to get a meeting with him?
All of the above. I mean, I think we definitely want to make sure that his campaign has read the letter and is taking all of this to heart. We know they have these new task forces or working groups that are being developed, and so making sure there's champions. Certainly, we have a lot of names who are listed in the letter who would be great for them to be engaged in those task forces, but also a lot of policy for them to really engage around. It's also about how.
Oh, you've faded
Um,
out for a moment. Could you repeat that? You've faded just for a brief moment.
Oh, sorry about that.
Oh.
But it's also about the I don't know if you heard about me saying about like for the task forces and the working groups to make sure they're discussing the issues that are included in here, and yes, moving on the issues. And also he has to fight for young people's votes. When we ask young people if candidates have contacted them, um, too many are saying they are not being contacted by candidates. We saw this in the primary where there was an unprecedented amount of folks running on the Democratic side, and still close to half of young voters not being contacted. It's unacceptable to just expect them to vote when nobody is actually engaging them to say, vote for me, and here is why.
How should we contact young people? Old people have phones that are like, they still have phones connected to the wall. You can call them. They still check their email. What's the best way to contact young voters these days?
I mean, certainly peer-to-peer work is really important. And that's part of why we think when we're engaging the young people that we've registered to vote across our network, they're turning out in much higher numbers. So we need to empower and hire young people to contact each other. It's certainly online on the different social media platforms, but also it is mail. Mail works for young people too. And so utilizing the multiple avenues to contact folks, it totally works for young people as well.
How many, how much of the group is concerned about, say, Medicare for all?
Healthcare is a top issue that young people care about. We are one of some of the more uninsured components of our population overall. So Medicare is really important. I think, especially in these times, especially in pandemic times, the idea of healthcare being tied to employment is really terrifying when so many people are losing their jobs. But also under healthcare, we've seen young people really speak up about the high cost of prescription drugs, whether it's for themselves as individuals who could be uninsured or as they watch their other family members struggle to cover those costs as well.
And I would imagine the environment is right up there as a top priority.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we've seen young people take to the streets time and again on the incredible climate strikes We're really grateful to be in partnership with friends like Sunrise Movement. And also it's about the climate, and it's also about our public lands, as our folks are fighting hard to make sure that our national parks are being treated with respect and funded to stay open. And
Yes. Do you have any evidence that Biden can be pushed to the left?
I mean, I think we've seen some promising signs. Certainly, how he's moved talking about free college while still means tested. In his approach, it's exciting that he's there. There's been a little bit of movement on student debt, which is really important, especially in these times. And so we remain hopeful. We have to remain hopeful. So I hope that those are the signs of more good shifts to come.
Absolutely. And what can our viewers do to help support and build power for this coalition and to push Biden's platform further to the left?
I mean, certainly for young people who are watching this, check out the groups on this list. These are badass organizations that we're really grateful to be in community with.
Say them again so people can, if they're just
Yeah,
listening, they can go Google and get on board.
absolutely. So my crew is the Alliance for Youth Action, and we have 20 groups across the country, including in probably many of the states of where your folks are from, that we'd love for you to join and check our groups out. But then also folks like Justice Democrats, If Not Now Movement, March for Our Lives Action Fund, Next Gen America, Student Action, Sunrise Movement, and of course, United We Dream.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. We've been talking to Sarah Audelo. You can find her on Twitter at Alliance, the number 4 Youth, and also at Sarah Audelo, AUDELO. Final thoughts before we sign off?
We only have each other, and so let's just lean on each other and to try to get across these really the finish line in these really hard times.
Thank you so much, and thanks for the work that you're doing to the benefit of all. If you're watching us on YouTube, please click and subscribe. You will get all kinds of interviews like the ones we just did. Thanks again, Sarah. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.